All right, welcome everyone to this webinar today about AI for Amazon PPC optimization. How does it really work? My name is Franz. I'm one of the founders of Sellics, and I'm excited to spend the next 30, 45 minutes or so talking about this super relevant topic for with you guys. I hope that you're all safe so far. Corona is pretty much out of control from what we see here. So I hope that you guys are all safe, and I hope that you have a lot of supplies and your inventories are still full, so that you don't feel the hit from the coronavirus so far. I can tell that from what we see, there's been obviously with the events there have been a lot of discussions which events should take place. So tomorrow there's the event in Prague, the European Seller Conference is still taking place, I believe. There's MFS UK in Manchester that was supposed to take place this week. I think that this got cancelled, and then in 2 weeks there's Prosper Show in Las Vegas, typically the biggest conference for the Amazon seller community, and I think it's still on at this point. Not sure it will be, but yeah, a lot of uncertainty right now in the Amazon industry, and so I hope that you all navigate this as nicely as possible, and that your business is not affected. I mean, potentially that you even benefit from this, right? If you have supplies but none of your competitors, then you're in a good state. But this is not the topic for today. Today, I'm very excited to share a lot of knowledge about probably the most mysterious topic on Amazon, which is AI for PPC. I'm not a particularly big fan of the word AI. I think that AI is always, just for the show. I think the other terms are better, but since everyone is using AI, I'm using it as well. We all know that PPC has become incredibly important on Amazon. Most of our users here at Sellics generate between 30 and 50% of their total sales through PPC. And however, this is also the most complex topic on Amazon to understand. So many sellers cannot spend the time it needs to really understand all the details of Amazon PPC. And so AI has been kind of promoted as a solution to this. But it's also a solution that adds complexity, because AI is very hard to understand and it feels like a black box. What I want to do today is to bring some light into this black box of AI and explain how AI really works in the context of Amazon PPC. Okay, so this is what I want to do today. While it is a very complex topic, I want to make sure that everyone can understand the concepts, which is why I will start on a very high and simple level, and then I will drill deeper over the course of this webinar. So this is not intended to be for expert only. We'll start on a very high level, and then we'll go into the details. I hope that everyone should be able to follow the entire presentation. If you have any questions, just some housekeeping, if you have any questions during the presentation, feel free to just hit the Q&A button, and you'll have a chat and you can send questions in. I'm always a lot more excited when it's interactive. So if you do have questions, feel free to just post them in the chat during the presentation, and I'll answer them as we go. And lastly, obviously, this is not a promotion of our AI solution. This is just a general explanation of how AI is applied to PPC, right? So don't take this as a promotional tour from Sellics. I will show you our AI solution at the end as well, but this is more broadly how AI as a concept works in Amazon PPC. Okay, and with that being said, let's get started. Let's get right into it. I think that over the past 12 to 18 months, there have been a lot of PPC software providers that have been shouting very loudly that you should use AI or machine learning to manage your Amazon PPC. And my perception is at this point that many of the sellers that we talk to, they don't know how AI works, and they don't know when it does deliver better results, right? And so this is the answer that we want to provide today. So today it is about giving you more clarity how those machine learning solutions or machine learning algorithms work and how they can improve your PPC performance. It doesn't always work, right? It works in some circumstances, and so it's giving you more context as to when it really works and how it works. That's the goal of this webinar today. As I said before, it is a very complex topic. And I like to compare it to an onion, where on the outside it is fairly easy to understand, right? So on the outside it is about optimizing revenue, but layer by layer, the deeper you go, it gets more into technical details, and at some point it becomes just incredibly complex. And so what we'll do today, this is essentially my strategy to bring this to a broader audience, is essentially we're going to start on the outside. So I will give you a high level explanation of the concept, and then layer by layer we'll dive deeper into the technical details. So we'll get not exactly to the core, but we'll get very close to the core as well throughout the presentation. Okay. So let's start with the very first layer that you in the algorithm, and I'd like to start with a very simple question. If you knew that you would make $10 in revenue when a shopper clicks on your ad, how much would you pay for this click if you want a 20% ACoS? So you know that you'll earn $10. You know you want to spend 20% of those $10. So how much are you going to pay for this click? The answer is pretty straightforward, right? The answer is, well, $2, right? It's pretty simple. 20% of $10 is $2. So that's pretty straightforward. So why is Amazon PPC then so complicated and so complex? Well, the problem with Amazon PPC is you don't know how much you will earn, right? You don't know how much money you will make if someone clicks on your ad. You can make some assumptions, but you don't know exactly how much you will make, which is why you cannot know what you should pay, right? If you don't know how much you make, you don't know how much you pay. And this is the fundamental challenge with PPC. And so this is, at a very high level, this is a core problem that all the AI solutions are helping to solve, which is essentially the AI is helping you to solve this problem by calculating the perfect bid for every keyword. Okay. Now, how is AI doing this? Well, again, so this is then the next layer. We're going a bit deeper in the onion. Essentially, what the software is doing is it's calculating how much revenue you will generate from a click, so you know how much you will make. And the next step is it is calculating how much you can pay for a click in order to hit a certain target ACoS. And then once it knows how much you can pay for a click, it will then determine the perfect bid, right? So first you determine how much you make, then you determine how much you can pay, and then you decide how much you can bid. This is essentially the sequence how machine learning works in the context of PPC. So to give you an example, so the first step, how much revenue will you generate from a click? Essentially, let's assume that you say this product here, this is a baby carrier that's selling for $100. You just you have a certain conversion rate for a keyword. So let's assume the conversion rate for a keyword baby carrier is 10%. This means that your expected revenue per click will be $10. Right? So why $10? Essentially because every 10th click leads to one sale, right? This is what a 10% conversion rate means. Out of 10 clicks, you will generate one sale. So one sale generates $100 in revenue. And if you take this together, this means that you generate $100 in revenue for every 10 clicks, or in other words, $10 for one click, right? This is how you determine how much revenue you'll make. Okay, so this is step one. So once you know that you will earn $10 for every click on the keyword baby carrier, the next question is, well, how much should you pay for it, right? And so here the target ACoS comes into play. So if you know that your expected revenue per click is going to be $10, you know you make $10, the target ACoS is 20%, then your affordable CPC, this is how much you can pay for a click in order to achieve your target ACoS, is essentially 20% of those $10, which is $2. Okay, so you calculate how much you will make, you multiply it with your target ACoS, and you will end up with your affordable CPC. This is how much you can actively pay for it. Okay, so that's the second step. And then the third step is that based on this affordable CPC, you need to calculate the perfect bid. So the affordable CPC in that case was $2, right? This is how much you can pay for a click. Now, however, on Amazon, in fact, in any PPC scenario, there's a difference between what you bid and what you end up paying. And I guess you all know this, right? But what you bid is typically a lot higher than what you end up paying. And so if you really want to understand how much you should bid, you need to adjust your affordable CPC by the bid to CPC ratio, right? So the bid to CPC ratio is the difference between the bid and your CPC. So if on average your bid is 50% higher than your CPC, then you will have a CPC bid to CPC ratio of 1.5. So you will multiply $2 with 1.5 and you end up with $3. So essentially, if you want to pay $2, you will need to bid $3, right? That's essentially what this is saying. And so the perfect bid, obviously, is the bid that is needed or that is required as an input to Amazon, right? So on Amazon, you don't enter your affordable CPC. On Amazon, you enter your bid. And then based on the bid, Amazon will tell you how much you will pay for it. Okay, so this is the third step. So you start with your affordable CPC and then you end up with the perfect bid. So if you take all of this together, this is essentially the formula how any software, and in fact also how you, if you manage your advertising manually, how you are determining the perfect bid. So you look at how much you will make, right, based on revenue times conversion rate. Then you calculate how much you can afford based on the target ACoS. And then finally, you apply the bid to CPC ratio to adjust for the fact that your bid is always higher than your cost per click and what you end up paying. Okay. So that's essentially the formula. And this is the formula that any machine learning or AI solution is optimizing for. So this formula, if you look at it, is actually pretty simple. So you may wonder, well, why is it such a difficult thing, right? So why is it so difficult to calculate the perfect bid? And the answer is the following. The problem is that you don't know these numbers. You don't know revenue, you don't know conversion rate, and you don't know the bid to CPC ratio. The only number you know is the target ACoS, because this is a number that is set by you as an advertiser. So you know how much you're willing to pay, but you don't know how much money you'll make for the next click on your ad. You don't know the conversion rate, and you also don't know the bid to CPC ratio. That is a fundamental problem. So what do you do if you don't know those numbers, but you need them? Well, essentially, you predict them, right? So instead of you predict the basket value, this is how much revenue you will expect. You predict the conversion rate and you predict the bid to CPC ratio, right? That is effectively what you're doing when you set a certain bid. You are implicitly predicting those different numbers, right? Okay, well, so then the question is, well, how do you predict this, right? So how do you predict basket value? How do you predict conversion rate? And how do you predict bid to CPC ratio? And here's the fundamental difference between humans and AI, machine learning, or algorithmic. Humans will typically predict the future based on the past. So they will predict the future based on historical averages. So as a human, you will have a tendency to say, well, my conversion rate for a certain keyword was 10% in the past 30 days. So I'm going to assume it's going to be 10% in the next 30 days, right? You assume that you've been making a certain, you've had a certain bid to CPC ratio because you look at the numbers and you say, well, on average, my bid is 50% higher than my CPC. But you always work with essentially historical averages, some sort of historical average, like the last 30 days, 15 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is. Typically, as a human, to predict the future, you work with the historical averages essentially. What does AI or ML stand for machine learning or algorithmic? This is essentially all the same, if you will. I mean, it's probably a bit simplified, right? But I prefer the terms machine learning or algorithmic to really describe what all those algorithmic solutions are doing for PPC. Well, those algorithmic solutions are predicting the future using large amounts of data, using statistical models, and using machine learning. Okay? So essentially, it's a somewhat of a different approach. The end goal is the same. Both you as a human and the machine or the algorithmic solutions both want to predict the future, because if you can predict the future, the more accurately you can predict the future, the better you'll be able to set your bids today. The difference is that humans use a rather simple way to predict the future using historical averages, whereas machine learning and algorithmic solutions, they use a ton of data, more data than most humans can process in Excel. Very complex statistical models, and then they apply machine learning concepts on top of this. Okay, so that is the fundamental difference. So how does it look in practice? So let's look. We'll go through different values, right? How the conversion rate is predicted. So let's start with this one, right? So to make it more tangible for you. So how are humans, and more importantly, how are algorithmic solutions predicting the conversion rate for a keyword? Let's look at this. As a humans, and that's what I said before, as a humans, you will have a certain tendency to just look at your past data. So you say, okay, I had a certain conversion rate in the last 30 days, and I'm going to use this to predict the conversion rate for the next 30 days. However, in 90% of the cases, this value will actually be off because there are three fundamental problems with conversion rate predictions. The first one is data availability. What do I mean by this? Well, let me give you an example. So this is what we as advertisers, we're always hoping for, right? We have two keywords, baby carrier and baby sling. And so in theory, we hope that over the past 30 days, we'll have 1,000 conversions from 10,000 clicks. So we can easily predict, calculate the conversion rate, right? We say, okay, that's a 10% conversion rate. And then we have another keyword with 75 conversions out of 500 clicks. And so we calculate the conversion rate again of 15%. That's what we hope for, right? The reality, however, looks much more like this. So you have a keyword where you have 0 conversions out of 8 clicks and you have 1 conversions out of 3 clicks. So the amount of data, the amount of clicks that you have for most keywords is significantly lower than what you hope for, what you need to really make a proper prediction. So if you have 0 clicks, zero conversions out of 8 clicks, that's a 0% conversion rate. Does that mean that no click will ever lead to a sale for the keyword baby carrier if you're selling a baby carrier? Probably not, right? Probably you are just unlucky and the first 8 clicks didn't lead to a sale, but maybe the 9th or the 10th click will already lead to a sale, and suddenly your conversion rate is not 0, it's 10%. The other example, if you have 1 conversion out of 3 clicks, that's a 33% conversion rate. Is it really fair to assume that you get a 33% conversion rate on baby sling? Probably not, right? Probably you got lucky. The first click led to a sale and you say, oh, that's really exciting. But now for the next 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 clicks, you will not generate any sale from this, right? So, well, what do you do then, right? If you just have 8 clicks or 3 clicks, what do you do? Do you calculate the conversion rate and say, well, I'm going to have a 0% conversion rate for baby carrier and 33% conversion rate for baby sling? Well, that's a problem, right? The problem is that in reality, you will not have enough data for most of your keywords. However, you need enough historical data to make statistically significant predictions about the future, right? So in order to calculate a good average, you need to have more than just a few clicks. So how does AI or machine learning solve this problem? The answer to this is called clustering. So let me explain this to you, right? And so this is where we get really into the deep, the deeper stuff. We're getting closer to the onion here, yeah, to the core of the onion. So let's assume that you're selling this product here, which is a baby carrier. Typically, shoppers that search for this product will use keywords such as baby carrier or baby backpack, okay? Now, there are other products. Well, there's another product called the baby sling. So a sling is serving the same purpose, which is carrying around your baby, but it's somewhat different because it's more of a tissue, whereas here it's more like a backpack. And so shoppers would typically search for baby sling and baby wrap. Now, the thing with those two products is that they're not exactly the same, but they're similar enough that some shoppers will search for those keywords here and end up buying a baby sling, and some shoppers will search for a baby sling and end up buying a baby carrier. Okay, so they're similar, but they're not exactly the same. So let's assume you sell this baby carrier here, right? You start a campaign, and then after 30 days or so, you look into your reports, and you will see something like this, right? So you see a bunch of different keywords: baby carrier, baby sling, baby wrap carrier, baby carrier sling, baby carrier hip seat, and so on and so forth. And you see a certain number of clicks. Individually, no keyword has enough clicks to really calculate a reliable conversion rate. None of those keywords, right? So the solution to this is called clustering. Clustering essentially means you're grouping keywords by similarity using thousands of different data points, right? So how do you group keywords by similarity? This is essentially a challenge. So let me give you a few examples. So An easy way, obviously, is that you cluster keywords by similarity. So the software will go and say, well, baby carrier and baby carrier hip seed, there's a certain overlay here that both talk about carrier. So I will group those two together. And vice versa, if I see baby sling and baby sling for newborn, again, I will see, well, those keywords are related, right? There's a pretty significant overlap. So I will group them together and make a cluster. A cluster essentially is just a fancy word for a group. So you have those two groups based on similarity. Say those two belong together and those two belong together, right? So clustering by similarities. You can also go and cluster by synonyms. So you can say, well, actually carrier and backpack, those are somewhat synonyms, and baby sling and baby wrap, those are synonyms as well, right, in that context. So let's group them together again based on synonyms. Okay, that's another way how you can group this. A third way to group this would be by shopper intentions, right? This is probably the one that is a bit more difficult because essentially here you have a keyword that says baby wrap carrier. So it includes the word carrier, but actually shoppers are really searching for a sling because it contains the word baby wrap, right? So they're really looking for a sling. And same with baby carrier sling. While it contains the word carrier, it should not be grouped with the word baby carrier. It should be grouped with the word baby sling. Okay, so this would be kind of like a trap where essentially, well, you know, the software needs to be smart enough to understand that despite containing the word carrier, shoppers actually are searching for a sling. Okay, and so if you do this, and so software is typically not using one method. Software is typically using not just also the three methods that I just described. The software is typically using thousands of different data points and is trying to understand patterns based on which they should group those together. And those patterns will not be the same. So it could be that for some customers, it makes a lot of sense to cluster by synonyms, whereas for other customers, synonyms don't play any meaningful role at all. So the clustering algorithm is essentially customized to every individual account. And so it's not using one approach to cluster. It is using many, like hundreds or even thousands of different ways to group them together. And this way it is essentially understanding what keywords can be grouped and what keywords cannot be grouped. So this is a very, very complex process, requires a ton of data, but the end result is pretty straightforward. The end result is instead of having a list of 8 different keywords, you end up with 2 different clusters. So you have this cluster 1, the green cluster, and you have this cluster 2, where essentially you have clustered all the different keywords together based on the different ways, based on the different methods, how you can cluster the keywords. And so now what the software does is instead of calculating the conversion rate or predicting the conversion rate for one individual keyword, it will use all the clicks that the cluster received and will make a conversion rate prediction based on the aggregated data. Okay? So by clustering keywords, the data set is increased and the conversion rate can be calculated in a much more reliable way. So you will say, well, here instead of having 2 clicks for baby backpack, I'm going to assume that for my first cluster, I'm receiving 34 clicks. And so based on those 34 clicks, you can make a much more reliable prediction about how the conversion rate will be in the future than if you just have 2 clicks. Okay, and same for cluster 2, you have 57 clicks, much better than 7, 14, 9, 16, 11, all of this. Okay. So that's one of the problems that humans solve in a very simple way, where machine learning or an algorithmic solution will do a much better job. Data availability, that's the first problem. The second problem is seasonality, right? So again, seasonality, if you're human and you just work with a 30-day average conversion rate, essentially you are assuming that your conversion rate has been exactly the same for the past 30 days. Every day, every minute, every second was exactly the same conversion rate for the past 30 days. Now the reality looks more something like this, right? So there are different types of seasonality. There's month of year seasonality. So some products will have, on average, if you look at the year, will have a 10% conversion rate, but they will have a 5% conversion rate in the first half of the year, and they will have a 15% conversion rate towards the end of the year. Okay. Same goes for day of week. So if you have a 10% conversion rate on a weekly basis, this does not mean that every day has 10%. So you could have products. So let's assume office supplies, for instance. office supplies are selling extremely well one Monday morning because all the office managers are coming back to work and they see how all the supplies are missing, so they place all their orders at the beginning of the week, right? However, over the weekend, essentially, the conversion rate is very low because, well, no one is buying office supplies on the weekend, or very few people. So while on average, your conversion rate might be 10% for that week, it will be 25% at the beginning of the week and only 3% at the end of the week. So if you work with a 10% average, you will be off most of the days, right? You will be off the beginning of the week. You might be right on Wednesday or Thursday, but you'll be wrong again on Saturday and Sunday. So you'll be understating at the beginning of the week and you'll be overstating at the end of the week, which essentially means that you'll be underbidding at the beginning and overbidding at the end. So you'll always be off because you don't take seasonality into account. So this is a problem if you use the historical average. So what does algorithmic solutions or machine learning solutions, what do they do? Well, essentially, they analyze historical performance to identify day of week and week of year seasonality. And then they apply the seasonality in the bidding strategy by anticipating recurring patterns. So if the software realizes that your conversion rate on Monday is always a lot higher than it is on Friday, the software will bid a lot more on Monday than it's going to bid on Friday. Okay? Because it knows that every Monday so far it's been a lot better than it was on Friday. Okay, and so the way again that the software is doing is it's looking at the past to identify if there are certain patterns, and then understands, well, what are patterns and what are just one-time recurring events, and then it is applying those patterns to the to predict the future, essentially, right? And so typically, some advertisers, what they will do is they will adjust month of year seasonality. So naturally, you will understand that if you sell swim gear, the summer is going to be a lot better for you. So you'll be willing to bid more in the summer than you'll be willing to bid in the winter. So let's say the month of year seasonality is typically something that advertisers, well, I wouldn't say typically, but the advanced advertisers are doing manually. But the day of week seasonality is something that no one is really doing manually, because it's just extremely difficult to even find out if you have a day of week seasonality. So that's a second problem that you encounter when you just use the historical average and in order to predict the conversion rate. And the third big problem that you have is are essentially market conditions. So what do I mean by this? Again, let's say you work with any historical average, like 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and you say my historical average is 10%. You essentially assume that it's flat throughout the entire time. The reality looks something like this, right? The reality is that the conversion rate is moving, and then there might be changes in the market that have a drastic impact on your conversion rate. So if you have a new competitor joining, right, a new ASIN and launch, and they're being very aggressive on PPC, you have certain shopper trends. Let's say fidget spinners. I don't know if you guys recall the fidget spinners, but I think it's been, 2 years ago, 2018, was it 2019? I don't recall exactly, but fidget spinner was a huge thing for 2-3 months, and then it was gone, right? So during those 2-3 months, you have a drastic increase in conversion rate because everyone is buying fidget spinners like crazy. But after those 3 months, it's down again, right? And same goes for your own ASIN. If you get a negative review and your rating drops, then this will have an impact on your conversion rate. Vice versa, if you get positive ratings and then your conversion rate will increase, right? But the bottom line is that there are a lot of changes happening in the market, and those are essentially unforeseen changes. And so again, while on average you might be right? On average you have a 10% conversion rate, it's true, but it was 20% before this change in the market, and it's 5% after this change in the market. So you will need to adjust your bid. And so the solution essentially to this is that, and again, this is the solution that the machine learning algorithms will have. They will understand what changes are temporary and what changes are lasting. And so if you have a temporary drop because you just had a bad day, or we've seen this a lot during a sports event. So in Europe, if you have the World Cup, days of the final or days of the quarterfinals, when you have big games, the conversion rate then say is a lot slower on that specific day because people are outside, they sit in the sun and they watch football. They're not buying products online. So this is just one temporary drop. There's no need to take action because tomorrow everything is back to normal. However, there are some changes that are more lasting, right? So if you get a negative review, then this might have a lasting impact. If there's a new competitor, this may have a lasting impact. So the challenge is that you want to react fast without overreacting, right? And so this is essentially what machine learning is doing. Machine learning is using a weighting algorithm to identify, well, what is actually a normal change and what is an abnormal change that requires some adoption. Okay. So those are three of the biggest differences when it comes to conversion rate prediction. So you have data availability that is solved through clustering, seasonality that is solved through a seasonality model, and the market conditions that is solved through weighting models. This is how algorithmic solutions handle those problems. And those problems that, humans have the same problems. It's just that humans, when you just work with your historical average conversion rate, essentially you just pretend as those problems don't exist, right? But those problems do exist. And so the question is, how do you handle them? And so typically, if done well, then the algorithmic solution can have can do a better job at this because it can handle more data and handle the complexity in a better way. Okay. So and this is we've been this was kind of those are the most important problems when it comes to conversion rate predictions. There are a lot of different things that need to happen on top of it. But my goal is to give you a flavor of like what is actually happening in those machine learning algorithms. What is the black box? And so essentially this is what's happening. Different ways to predict conversion rate and to cope with those challenges. So let me just see if there are any questions so far. Doesn't look like there are any questions at this point. So let me then move on with the next value, right? Predicted basket value. So how do you predict the basket value? Basket value is essentially how much are people going to spend if they buy your products. And so you might say, well, that's simple. My product has a certain sales price. I'm selling it for $39, right? So my revenue is going to be $39, right? Because that's the price of the product. Machine learning, on the other hand, is assuming that the basket value is not equal to the price of the advertised ASIN, right? And so you might ask, oh, why is this the case, right? So why should my revenue be different than the price I get for an ASIN? Well, the answer essentially is the following, right? Let's assume that every 10th customer is buying 2 units after clicking on your ad, and not just 1 unit. Then your expected basket value is 43.95 instead of 39.95. Okay, why is this the case? Well, why is this important? Well, if you know that on average you make $33 and not $39, you can actually bid more. And if you bid more, you'll make more revenue from this, right? So it's 43 instead of 39. So essentially the bottom line is you have situations when people buy multiple units of the same product, then this will have an impact on your basket value. Another example, let's assume that you have variations. So you advertise this ASIN here for $39. The customer gets to the product detail page and says, oh, great, there are different variations. And it ends up buying this one here, which is selling for $59. So it's a lot more expensive. So if 1 out of 3 customers is buying the more expensive child ASIN, your expected revenue again is not 39, it is actually 46, right? So again, because sometimes you have cross-selling effects, and this is not just on the same ASIN. So let's assume that you advertise ASIN A, but the customer ends up buying ASIN B, and ASIN B has a different price than ASIN A. Then your average basket value is not going to be the price of the advertised ASIN. It might be something different. Okay. And then finally, latency, which is also a big issue. So revenue is typically generated over 7 or 14 days after the click. So you have you'll notice that on Amazon, you have a 7 or 14-day attribution window, 7 for sellers, 14 for vendors, right? So there's a certain delay between the click and the revenue. Now, if you really want to know how much revenue you will make, you will wait for the 7 or 14 days and then look back and be like, okay, well, this is how much revenue I really made. Now, in order to adjust bids faster, or the drawback of this is that you always need to wait for 7 days before you can take action. And so in order to adjust bids faster, Autopilot is predicting what revenue will be generated over the next 7 days, and instead of waiting, and then will make those bid adjustments based on the predictions, okay? So latency is the third big thing why basket value is not necessarily equal to the price, because there's a certain delay. So those are three reasons why basket value is actually not equal to the price. And so what machine learning is doing, essentially machine learning is truly calculating how much revenue you'll make, whereas humans will typically default and say, well, if I'm advertising a product for $100, I'm going to assume that I'm going to make $100 in revenue. Okay. So that's for the predicted basket value. And then finally, you have the predicted bid to CPC ratio. So I think I'm just going to skip this for the sake of time. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain, because of the way the algorithm works or the auction works, you have a second price auction. Essentially, when competitors are changing their bids, it has an impact on your bid. So the bid to CPC ratio is changing continuously, and you constantly need to adjust and fine tune it, right? That's essentially the idea. But I'm going to skip this. I think it's a lot less interesting than this part here. So this is a final part, right, that to give you an understanding of the complexity that machine learning can handle. So far, I think this has already been quite complex, right? So how do you calculate, or how do you predict the conversion rate? How do you predict basket value? How do you predict the bid to CPC ratio? Now, however, if you really want to get the best possible results, you need to optimize the entire account, not the individual keyword. Okay, so this is a bit complex, but so far, the conversion rate prediction and the basket value prediction, all of this has been looking at one individual keyword. However, if you look at one individual keyword only, you are missing, or you're passing on potential. And so let me explain what I mean by this. Let me give you an example. Let's assume that you have one keyword. This keyword is below target ACOS. So let's assume your target ACOS is 25 and you're currently at 15%. So you could increase your bids. However, this keyword is saturated, which means that you already ranked number one, right, for that keyword with your ad. So effectively, what happens is you cannot generate more revenue because you're already number one. And so the bid is still increased because you're below target ACOS, but this increase in bid doesn't have any impact. You won't make more revenue just by increasing bids because you're already ranked number one, okay? So essentially here you're wasting potential. Then you have a second keyword in your account where it is exactly on target and where it's not saturated. So you could generate more revenue at a higher bid, but you cannot increase bid because the ACOS is already on target, right? So you say, oh, I have a 25% target ACOS. I'm on 25% here. So I'm just going to leave the bid where it is. So if you take those two things together, essentially, keyword one is below target and it has maxed out its potential. Keyword two is on target but missed potential. So altogether as an account, you will be below target, right? Because one is on target, the other one is below target. So you'll be below your target, but you're also missing opportunity. You're also missing revenue, right? Now, what would machine learning do? Well, machine learning would look at the entire account and optimize the entire account. And machine learning essentially will say, well, the bid should not be increased because there is no additional revenue that can be generated. So we're going to keep this bid here for keyword one where it is. But we can shift the unused budget to the second keyword, right? And so the bid is increased to generate more revenue despite this one being on target. So that the end effect will be that for the second one, you'll actually be not on target. So I apologize here. You'll be above target, right? So for keyword two, your ACOS will be higher than your target ACOS, But as a whole, because you have keyword 1 that is below the target, on average, you will be on target. Okay, so that means that you're maxing out the revenue potential and you're offsetting because 1 is below target and there's essentially free budget. You're shifting this budget to another keyword and you're optimizing so that you generate more revenue. Okay, so this is quite complex to follow, but this is a very, very important aspect. Typically, if you manage PPC manually, you're always optimizing and looking at this one individual keyword, whereas machine learning algorithm or algorithmic solutions, they can optimize your entire account. And they will shift budgets around. If they see, oh, I have some unused budget here on this keyword, they can shift it to another one. And so you have one keyword below target, another one above target, but on average, you'll be exactly on target while maximizing revenue. Okay. So coming back to the opening question, right? So if you knew that you would make $10 in revenue when a shopper clicks on your ad, how much will you pay for this click if you want a 20% ACoS, right? So typically Autopilot, which is our solution, right? But algorithmic solutions, they know better. They can predict better how much you will generate in revenue. And so because they can predict better, they will also be able to set better bids. Okay, that's essentially the reason why algorithmic solutions, if done properly, they outperform. Now, the thing with algorithmic solutions is, in order for them to know better than you, right, they need a ton of data, which is why typically algorithmic solutions only make sense beyond a certain threshold. So if you have a spend of, let's say, more than 5 or 10K a month or so on PPC, because if you don't have the data, then the algorithmic solutions and all the statistical models and all of this just doesn't have too much of an impact and doesn't work, right? So that's it for the algorithmic solution. Let me see if there are any questions at this point. Looks like there are no questions. So that's I take this as a mixed sign, right? Was it too easy or too complicated? I don't know. But if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in now, and I'll make sure to answer them. And so while you're sending your questions, I would like to introduce you to a new feature that we've been releasing, which is Autopilot, right? So Sellics Autopilot is effectively an algorithmic ad management solution for Amazon PPC. I'm sure that you guys have been using Sellics. So if you've been using Sellics, you've been using our rule-based approach. And so Sellics now also offers, on top of the rule-based optimization, we also offer Autopilot as an algorithmic or as an AI solution to manage your ads. So the way this works is that if you're in Sellics, in your PPC manager, you will find a new tab called Autopilot. And so this Autopilot, if you click on it, you will essentially be able to use our algorithmic solution. The beauty of this is that it is extremely simple to use. So the only thing that you need to do is you need to enter a certain target ACoS. So let's assume you want to have a target ACoS of 25% here for this campaign. You can then choose the campaign that you want to automate. And then you just hit save changes, and you can start Autopilot with just one click. So you can just go and hit save, and this will essentially start your Autopilot. And then Autopilot is doing the bid management for you and is adjusting the bids constantly on your behalf, right? So it's a very simple solution. You just enter your target ACoS and then you press start, right? This is essentially how Autopilot works. And so this is a new functionality that we offer to our clients these days. If you're interested in Autopilot, feel free to send us a message. You can send an email to autopilot@sellics.com or just try to reach us. But it is a new solution that we've been working on for a year and a half now, actually. So we've been really fine-tuning the algorithm. It's been in beta for about 9 months, and so we're excited to now publicly release this to a broader audience as well. So if you're interested in algorithmic ad management for your PPC campaigns, feel free to reach out to us. So with that being said, are there any questions? Still no questions. I'm wondering, I'm wondering, is there any feedback from you guys? Was it easy to understand? Was it too easy, too difficult? Any feedback from you would be appreciated. Otherwise, I'm reaching the end of my presentation. Actually, I could show you a little more if you're interested. But first, want to make sure that we have all questions covered. I'm testing this, so the slides are not final yet, but I'm going to give you a sneak peek essentially into the slides I've been working on to explain the difference between algorithmic and manual optimization. So the fundamental question is why can algorithmic lead to better results, right? And so I think I gave you a ton of reasons already now in the presentation, but I think what is important to understand is that on Amazon, essentially for any given ACOS, you will generate a certain revenue, right? And typically the higher the ACOS, the higher the revenue, and at some point it just flattens out, right? This is typically how it works on Amazon, right? And so there's a certain trade-off between ACOS and revenue. Now, the thing that is important to understand is that there is the max revenue that you can generate for any certain ACOS, right? So if you manage your campaigns manually, typically you see a certain ACOS. So let's say you have, 30% ACOS and you make $10,000 in revenue. But there is a certain max revenue that you can generate out of every single ACOS, okay? And so the reason why algorithmic solutions can generate or can outperform is that essentially this delta here, the difference between the max revenue and the revenue that you're currently generating through manual management, this is essentially the missed revenue, and this is the potential for optimization, okay? And so when you apply algorithmic solutions, you have two options. The first option is you try to keep the same ACOS, right? So the ACOS here is the same, right? You try to keep the same ACOS, but you move up closer to the max revenue. Or the other option is you try to keep the same revenue, so you're flat here, but you try to have a much lower ACOS. Okay, so those are the two options. So generally speaking, what algorithmic solutions are trying to do is they try to move as close as possible to the max revenue line, depending on the target ACOS that you set. So if you set a target ACOS of this value here, the algorithmic solutions will try to get you as close as possible to this line, right? And if you set a target ACOS here, again, algorithmic solutions will try to get you here. If you set a target ACOS here, they will try to get you as close as possible to this line, right? But so it's essentially, this what they're doing. So let me just see. So, yeah. So essentially, the impact that you will see from algorithmic campaigns will depend on how well your campaigns are currently optimized, right? So if the blue dot, essentially, this would be your current performance, right? If your current performance is right here, there's a lot of optimization potential for algorithmic solutions. So they can increase revenue a lot, or they can decrease ACOS by a lot. But if your campaigns are already well optimized, algorithmic solutions are more limited. There's less room for improvement, right? So the expectation or the question, how much you can improve your performance, or how much can algorithmic solutions improve your performance, depends very much on how well your campaigns are already optimized. But broadly speaking, autopilot, it will get as close as possible to the max revenue line. And now the question is, well, why is there a need for an ongoing optimization, right? And so the answer to this is, well, because there is a certain, the max revenue line is changing. So today your max revenue line might be this. Next week, your ASIN got a bad review, so suddenly the max revenue that you can generate for every ASIN is a lot lower. And then 2 weeks later, your most important competitor is running out of stock, so suddenly you can generate a lot more revenue for this ACOS. So you constantly want to make sure to test where is this max revenue that I can generate for any given ACOS. And you want to make sure that if the max revenue is increasing, you capitalize on this as well. And if it's decreasing, you're taking this into account as well. Okay, so this is why optimizing PPC campaigns, also if you do, it doesn't matter if you do it through algorithmic solutions or if you do it manually, this is why you need to constantly fine tune and adjust it, because market circumstances are changing. And so this revenue you can generate for any ACOS is going to be different. Okay. So that's just some context. As you saw, the slides are still in the working, but maybe for some of you this helps you to visualize. I personally like to see it on a chart, but that's essentially, if we go back here, this explains where algorithmic solutions can optimize, right? So if you're currently here, then this situation would be better, or this situation would be better. Okay. So yes, that's it for real, essentially. So I have no more slides to share. So I'm just going to give you another minute or so to hand in any questions that you have. I hope that this was helpful. I know that the market has been flooded with AI and algorithmic solutions, and I just feel that the market is not educated enough about like how is it working and why can it outperform, right? And so I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the market, and this is why we want to we want to educate the market. Obviously, I mean, clearly, we also want to sell our product, right? I don't want to hide this, but I also want to give you the context as to why we think this actually makes sense, right? So this is our mission here. Dina had more questions. Since max revenue changes, how can you know what it is besides using AI? Well, the only way to really do this, if you do it manually, right? If the max revenue is changing, is to constantly test it, right? And this is what AI is doing. AI is constantly testing and figuring out, well, has the revenue line changed essentially? Yeah. This is how this is handled. Yeah, so I hope this gives the answer. So you can technically, Dina, essentially what you can do is you can just go in today and you can double your bids and see if you make twice as much revenue, or only 10% more revenue, or only 0% more revenue, right? And so by testing this and understanding the impact of this, you can essentially, get a sense of how close are you to your revenue line. Cool. So Jay Nicholson says that it's been very helpful to understand this. Well, I'm glad. Yeah. So I'll fine tune the slides and get this all correct. But I think that this is fundamentally, I think that AI is kind of as a black box and is sold as magic, but it's not magic. There's some logic behind, right? And there's a certain sense behind. And so we don't want to pretend like this is magic and this is a money printing machine. AI is optimizing and trying to get the most out of it, and so now you have the core concepts as to why it should be better than manual management. So I'm glad it helped you, Jay. Cool, awesome. Let me see if there are any other questions. I don't think so. I think I put them all in. Well, in that case, thank you very much again for your attention. Again, I hope this has been helpful. We'll make sure to follow up and send a recording. Again, if you want to give it a try, if you want to talk to us about Autopilot, see if this is a good fit for you, feel free to send us an email. autopilot@sellics.com would be the right email, but you can also reach us through any other means. And then again, I wish you all the best for the next couple of weeks. I hope that Corona is not impacting you too much. Yeah, all the best for you and for your advertising. Yeah, thanks again, and see you next time. Bye bye.